Hello, everyone. I am Rachel Milano, founder of REMwell Foundation, and today I am doing another live stream video session, Talk Till Someone Listens. Going to pick up my posts that I use on Instagram. My motivational posts, if you want to follow those, you can go to REMwell, REMWEL, all one word, .foundation, and you can find me there on Instagram. I'm trying to post motivational messages every day. And on those, I'm going to be pulling out each of those and kind of expounding on those topics. So each one of those will wind up being a TV talk topic, TV standing for traumatic violation. Traumatic violation meaning anything that has usurped your will and created life-threatening trauma in your life. I'm working on the ums. I say a lot. So the one that I posted the other day with a image of a man, which is the same image as the page saver that you saw today, but if you want to view more of it, you can go to my Instagram page and see it there. I'm also going to be posting it on Facebook, which you can find REMwell Foundation on Facebook too. Just include the article, The REMwell Foundation, and then you can find us there too. To see more about our work in the community and our work with survivors, you can go to REMwellFoundation.org to see some of that information. And then if you would like to find out more about our Walk of Love Memorial Garden for traumatic violation survivors and departed, you can visit our GoFundMe page. You can access those links via the bio here, or also through any of those other social media platforms. So I'm just going to read briefly what the little motivational empowerment message that I left on that image of the man who has amputations. I thought that was a good one to start with, because a lot of the talks that I would like to share in TV Talk Topics is about getting the social mindset to be able to wrap its mind around what it is like for traumatic violation survivors on a day-to-day basis. What it is to walk around with our mind and with our thought processes and with and when I say our, I said yesterday, but I'll confirm again today, I am a complex traumatic violation survivor. So that meaning that I have experienced long-term traumatic violation from various trauma types. Trauma types being such as domestic violence, sexual assault, childhood maltreatment, social violence. So all of those types of trauma come under the umbrella of traumatic violation. So the quote that I put in there, which is my own quote, it is easy to look at this man and understand his physical limitations, but when TV, traumatic violations, amputates part of our internal development process and capabilities to the same degree of severity, then people cannot easily see those limitations. It is inappropriate and inhumane to tell TV survivors to act right, or to act normal, or ask, what's wrong with you? Or, it's not as hard as you think, just do it. Or, you can do it if you choose to, you just don't want to. Or, stop waiting for someone to help you. Help yourself. Or, I could go on and on and on. But I don't need to go on and on, because you've either been the person saying it or have been the person who has said it to them. So these are statements that shouldn't be said to the man in the picture. And if you believe that you couldn't look at that man in that picture who has 3 limbs amputated and make those same types of statements, then consider the possibility that when you're addressing a traumatic violation survivor from whichever walk of trauma that they have experienced, that they too have some amputated parts of the natural organic development inside of them, that they have had these internal these internal modifications as a direct result of trauma. So you're looking at someone who has amputations because of some damage that has been done. Well, when damage is done internally, those things are processed by the brain. Those things are healed by the brain. There is no surgeon that comes in from outside and opens our brain after trauma and tries to rewire things that may have been wired or rewired as a result of trauma. Nobody does that. There are psychological therapies, there are intervention support, but there's nothing that directly goes into the brain and fixes the damage that has been done. We wind up having to carry that and live with that all of our lives. So how we function and how we are assessed based upon our abilities or what outsiders would look at you physically and say, you should be able to, like, you're just like us, like, why can't you do it? If I can do it, you can do it. You've heard some of these things, but that's not what happens. It's when you look at a person who's experiencing cerebral palsy, for example, it's easy for your mind to say, yo, something is up with how this person's brain function is interfering with the physical function. Like, it's easier to make those connections. But when you're talking about behavior and you're talking about trauma and shame and the impacts of stigmas, and when you're talking about these types of things that are disabling and crippling, and you're talking about PTSD, and you're talking about all these added equations where the person has to physically continue to animate themselves in the real world and look functional, it's very hard then to tie in the fact that behavioral response and how that brain is processing, that there shouldn't be any amputations. Like, you look normal. You look like you're doing okay. You look like this. Looks are deceptive. Looks, appearances are deceiving. So there should be an automatic default to consideration to the fact that we're not going to live life the way we would have lived life without the impact of traumatic violation. That's just an impossibility. Depending on the severity and the complexity, or depending upon the longevity of those violations, we are simply incapable. And when I say simply, I mean simply. You look at that man and you say, simply, that man cannot run a marathon just like that. There have to be other things to help someone who has had amputations to achieve that the same way every other runner would, to maintain the stamina, to maintain the speed, to maintain just being a part of that collective unit that is, spread out amongst the miles, to not finish weeks late, to finish, within the time frame that is conventional to finish a marathon. So all of these things, when you look at it, is it possible? Sure, but they're going to need something additional to make that happen. Traumatic violation survivors need that too, but most times they don't get that. They don't get that because, well, for several reasons, but primarily because it's hard to come out and talk about issues that are going to shun you back into your shell. So to get the support, just getting to the place in your life where you're able to face the fear of getting support and face the consequences of getting support. A lot of times people are protecting family members, especially in instances of domestic violence and sexual assault, where the offenders are actually people who are interwoven into the very fibers of the network of life that their everyday living depends upon. Family, friends, and then, bringing it up, is it going to break down the family unit? Are people going to create relationship divisions? Are they going to turn against you? Like, there are so many extended reasons why survivors don't talk. So there's a lot of talk now that you hear in the media about why did you wait so long? I tell you, there's some things I waited to talk about till my mama died. And it's just because there's just so much entrenched, and the longer time goes on, the more those outside networks and relationships build, because that's the nature of life. Like, time creates a deeper union. That includes the type of relationship you have with the trauma that has impacted you, and the people who might be so close to the people, whether they're best friends with, and it was the best friend who offended, the best friend of your parent who offended you, and they're still best friends, or the uncle, or your auntie, or your cousin. And listen, it becomes really complicated to bear the load as the survivor and as the victim, to then create a ripple effect that your voice would create, your voice of truth would create a ripple effect in the entire family. And you would be, that is, even though it is the fault of the offender, the perception from the rest of them is that you did that. You created the destruction of the family. You're the one who created by just saying anything. So the burden that is carried around by some of these women and men alike, be they minors or adults, to remain the vault for the violation, to remain the internal vault for the violation, and to keep that under lock and key. The pressure to do that is just so great, you cannot fathom it. The consequences of how society aids and abets the type of mentality that keep survivors in a state of stigma is something that really needs to change. The two together create the perfect storm within a survivor that keeps them silent. And it is when you can find that there are others who have had the same experience in the same set of circumstances, and so you feel more comfortable with, like, I can say me too. I can say that was me too, because I'm not alone with this particular person. And it could have taken decades to be able to say that. And even after saying that, you still run the threat and the risk of being shamed for exposing what took place, and exposing the fact that you were violated. So there's just such a huge burden on the survivor themselves. And so when we as a society start giving a platform to those who have not been violated to talk about what it's like for someone who has been violated, and what you should expect that person to do in cases where they've been violated. Like, if you've been violated, you need to tell somebody right away. If you've been violated, why did you wait so long? If this happened to you and that time, if that's really the truth, then why this? If that's really the truth, then why that? Until you are in those circumstances and until you are the one carrying the burden of the consequences of voicing what happens to you, you're not the one who should be given the platform to speak, because you just don't know what that's like. And for someone who has undergone internal amputations, okay, violation does that. You cannot expect them to function and respond the way you, who have not been violated, should respond. It may make sense to you that, boy, if this happened to you, wouldn't you go tell somebody? I would go tell somebody. You cannot expect them to think that way, because in our minds, things are not the same. We have a different set of logical parameters. We have different set of boundaries. We are battling what this thing has done to us. We are battling and arguing these internal struggles with social perception, with family destruction, with family secrecy and shame. Like, we carry all of that by ourselves until we are in a situation where we feel like we don't have to carry that by ourselves. Oh my gosh, this is my chance. I should do it. That could take a very, very long time. And yes, in some cases, in the meantime, which the offenders, the violators, are counting on the fact that this is our circumstance and this is our situation, and that they already know that we are going to be crippled and debilitated, and our voice is going to be quenched by what they did, and the circumstances that society has set up for us to keep in the shadows of shame with. And they depend on that. That's why they can get away with doing it for generations. A lot of times, the only thing that stops them is getting caught. Well, some never get caught. And meanwhile, dozens and dozens and dozens of people are directly impacted. And then from that direct impact goes the impact of their default response to the trauma. And then those people connected to them, they are then having their own traumatic experience based on your traumatic experience, which hasn't been brought to light or may have been brought to light. And then you are then acting out as a result of that, or malfunctioning as a result of that. I like that term, malfunctioning, because it is something that those who function in the norm comprehend. Okay, you understand this is how I would do it. But would you do it that way if your system was malfunctioning? If your wires were crossed and you still had to somehow function normally, would you be able to do that? Until you are in that set of circumstances, you cannot speak for what we should do or should have done, or how we should approach this or how we should approach that. If society made it a comfortable situation for us to do, we might be more prone to doing it. But the fact is, if you look at the three-ring circus of the movement right now, you will see that in a very short time, we are going to repeat the same loop that was repeated decades and decades ago when this was attempted before, where we had our voice and we had our moment to come out. And then we will be disbelieved again because there's so many people coming out. There can't be that many. There are that many. There are that many. There are that many of us. And yes, like anything, everything has people where someone is opportunistic or has some sort of emotional distress in which they are seeking out attention for something that they want to ride the wave on. And so, hey, now all of a sudden I have a voice, and it might not be my real voice, but it's something like that happened to me. So I'm gonna say this. So yes, you're going to have people who are fucking it up for the rest of us. Oh, I'm trying not to drop bombs. I'm trying to compose myself. But the fact of the matter is they are the minority. And the majority should not be maltreated, dismissed, or further violated socially because of the minority. There are always going to be people who come out there and falsely accuse. That's going to happen whether the voice is out or not. That happens anyway, and it happens with every circumstance, not just sexual violation, domestic violence, childhood maltreatment, you're going to have people who will accuse you of stealing that you didn't steal. That has nothing to do with violation. It's the nature of humanity. That needs to be honored and not made out to be like this is something that happens whenever a sexual violation is involved. When there's sexual abuse, people start talking about sexual abuse. They come crawling out the woodwork talking about they had this and that happen to them and it never happened. There is a way to tell whether or not it has happened truly or not. And I'll go into that in another talk about profiling. But there are clear signs when it has happened and when it is not. I go into a big thing about exuding and emulating. It's just like, oh, I'm going to save it because it's a whole topic in itself, but be looking for it because it is very important to understand the difference between someone who is exuding circumstances that are questionable and versus someone who is emulating it. Emulating the circumstances which are questionable. And it's always questionable when there is an accusation. It's questionable because society has to be able to have the opportunity to have justice, the law, play its course. Even in that, there are injustices. And I'll go into even that later on as we talk more about the system and how broken that system is and the impact and the ramifications on survivors and society. Because my big deal is it takes two. Okay, there is the traumatic violation survivor, but there is also society. And society it is like the soil and we are like the seed. So we need to be able to create a society in which the soil is ready to receive the seed. And that's what REMwell Foundation is all about. It is about getting to a place where society can embrace the truth of violations and traumatic violations and make it easier for healing and restoration to occur. If the soil is hard, if the environment and the conditions are not conducive for restoration, there's not enough therapy to fix it. There's not, because it is so closely the two have to happen together. It's an old saying, and I try not to be religious at all because I want to keep restoration neutral, because pain is non-discriminatory. So healing also is non-discriminatory. So my approach is to keep that neutral. But there is a saying that says throwing your seed on rock. Some say that, throwing your seed on rock can't produce a fertile ground. It can, it's just a lot harder. If that seed finds that one crevice. And for some of us as traumatic violation survivors, that's what it's like. We find that one crevice in which we can become fertile and grow and root. And that's, you'll notice when you go to my Instagram page, I use a lot of just the imperial life lessons that I see in nature and apply that to our internal being, because we are no less natural than that which we see out there growing and thriving and or struggling in the world. So I use those as metaphors to help demonstrate that the healing process is two-part. It is twofold. It is not just what goes on inside this system. It is what goes on out there in that system combined with, because every day it's a collaboration. Every day I wake up and I wipe my ass with toilet paper. That is something that I need this system for, because someone has to manufacture the toilet paper. I'm not making it. That's just, a weird analogy, but a very true one. I cannot function without the things that function in life, and life will not function without the way that we internally function and or malfunction. And that is a direct reflection of how our society is going to manifest the whole of traumatic violation. Just like economically, over a nearly $300 billion a year are spent on the consequences of traumatic violation, whether it be in medications for mental health and mental distress, whether it be in uh, physical surgical procedures as a result of trauma from physical violation. It just goes on and on, where maybe even the government is having to pay for therapy, or even housing the criminals. It just goes on and on and on. There's an economic impact, there is a social impact, there is a legal impact, it goes on. We are not just in our little holes, struggling and suffering through trauma. We are impacting directly those things, because we wake up every day and we have to make purchases. Are we binge eating? And those are purchases that we have to make. Are we binge drinking? Those are purchases we have to make. These are all direct, indirect impacts on society. So to heal in here, I also need the ground out there ready to receive and grant me the opportunity and the chance for restoration. So the overall goal of REMwell Foundation, and you'll notice in our logo, is to reverse the madness. And to do that, it's going to take retraining the brain of not just the traumatic violation survivor, but also the society's perception. And the media can help with that a lot, because they're giving the wrong people the platform. Having the answer to something is not having the solution to it. So we need to begin using these opportunities and these platforms as not just saying, doing roll call and saying who, but saying how. How do we fix this? And to find out how, you have to go inside here, not inside everybody, inside the ones who have been violated. You have to find the solution by going inside and finding the problem. Where did violation rewire the brain? There are lots of books, there are lots of therapies. I come from a layman's perspective. This is a layman's approach, because I can relate to this process as it is for the everyday person who may not have access to the best medical treatment, to the best recovery programs, who may not be able to afford their recovery, because these days and age, to get good restoration support, you have to have good money. But the fact of the matter is, although this impacts every economic status, the minorities are suffering greatest suffering the greatest consequence, because they can't afford to get good treatment. Now, just because you can go to Lutheran services or go to Catholic charities and try to get you some support, that doesn't mean it's good support. That just means you're getting something that has been funded and provided for you. And sometimes, people only give you what they're being paid to give you. That's the reality of the trench survivor, okay? For the survivors who are living in the gutters, who are living in the trenches, who are struggling independently and silently in a set of circumstances set up to sabotage restoration. I mean, it's just set up that way. So we'll talk more about all of that kind of stuff. I don't know how long I've talked, because I lost track, and I don't even think I have properly been looking at my chat session or whatever, but nobody's in there. I'm still talking to myself, but that's okay, because the goal here is to talk till someone listens. So I'll be talking again, and I'll come back, and we'll talk about another topic, but yep, I'm just at my 30 minutes. So I just wanted to encourage you to consider for yourself. Consider for yourself. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Are you on the social side, who has never experienced traumatic violation, but you're connected to people who are, which you absolutely are? And how are you treating them or mistreating them? Are you creating an environment with the words that you say that are enabling their restoration, that are encouraging their healing? Not by commanding, you need to be doing it, you need to be doing it, you need to be doing it. No. But are you creating a situation in which is non-hostile, non-aggressive, and safe for them to expose and discover and journey through the process of restoration? And are you giving them the grace they need to do that? They're going to fuck up a lot, but are you giving them the grace to make those advances, to make progress? And are you on the other side where you are the victim or the survivor or the thriving survivor? Are you on that end of the spectrum, and are you expecting too much from society? Are you doing your role to retrain society how to embrace new victims, and how to embrace the mindset of traumatic violation within our culture and within our diversities? Are you doing that work? And do you even understand that that is your position? Do you understand what you are growing through? And if you don't, your duty and your obligation is to get yourself on the road to restoration and discover how you can best use you, the tool, the greatest tool that you have, to impart restoration in your life and in the life of the overall demographics in society. So that is part of what these discussions will be about. And I hope to talk to you again later on today, because I will be talking until someone listens. And I encourage you to talk till someone listens. Whoever you need to talk to, however you need to bring forth the truth that is within you. Just do it safely, and do it in a manner in which is going to, in a manner in which is not going to make another person feel offended or harmed by you. I know it can be hard, especially early on, where, you know, you just want to scream it out. You just want to regurgitate it. You just want to, I know all about that. And there are some people who can endure it, and who will say, you know what, just do that to me. Like, do you need to regurgitate this? I will hold your hair for you, so to speak. There are some people out there who are able to do that. And then, but most are not. Most are just like, yo, that's just like a little too much for me. Like, I can't, I just can't, you know? So you have to like choose wisely. And that person might be someone you know, but that person might be a stranger. If you got to get on a helpline, if you got to get into your church community, or your circle of girlfriends, or however that might be, whoever that might be, choose wisely that it's not going to be someone who compounds your trauma through words of discouragement, or words of insensitivity. Find someone who you know, or who you believe would be a good listening ear. And that's where it starts. It starts with finding someone who's willing to listen, because when they listen, their perspective changes. And then they begin to wonder, how can I help you? Empathy only comes, and sympathy only comes whenever the person is truly listening. You can hear all kinds of shit in this world, but when it's only one that person is truly listening, and if you find that it bounced off that person and it wasn't effective for you, and it wasn't effective support for you, talk again. Talk to someone else until someone is willing to listen to your pain and help direct you, because you can't guide yourself. You can't go into a surgical room and do your own operation. There are parts of you that you just need the skill set. You just need someone to show you how. And when you can find that, then you can do the work. You know, it's like when you're sent home from the doctor. Like, I was recently just sent home from the hospital after a surgical procedure, and I am given instructions. I'm given instructions, care instructions, on how to make sure that the healing process that I started in the hospital is maintained, number one, and is successful, number two. So you talk till you find that. You talk till you find that, because the biggest part of prevention is and the prevention of ongoing compounding violations, where you're actually in a situation where this is going to happen again, or you're repeating patterns. Like, the biggest part of preventing that is care, preventative care, doing that which you can do right now to prevent future violation. to be more alert, to be more in tune, to repair the wires that have been crossed. Some you can fix, and some will be amputated for life. I can tell you just by looking at those who have not been, and talking with those who have not been violated. Yo, I don't have that. like that's not in me. And so these are things we'll discover and learn over time. And I'll keep talking about, the various aspects of how traumatic violation directly impacts the things that are organic development inside of you that are altered, and in some cases, just like the man in the image, altered for life. Like he's just not going to just up and grow a new leg. He's not going to make his brain, talk himself into the extension of his limb. Like that is not what happens. We're still human, and we are going to malfunction normally until we are capable of functioning normally. And in some cases, it means that we'll have full restoration, full, a transformation into a strong, vital human being. And in some cases, it means that we're going to go throughout the rest of our lives permanently altered by the things that occurred to us. So that's the end of my talk for today. This is TV, Traumatic Violation Talk Topics. And we are going to talk till someone listens, and continue to encourage people to talk till someone listens, not just hears you. This is not just about getting on the media platforms and having the ability to be brave enough to say it was you, but to go beyond that, into the solution zone, so that we can minimize the escalating socioeconomic impact of traumatic violation. So more talk later. I'll see you again, and I hope this has been somewhat helpful to the listening audience of today and the future to come. Take good care, and all you do, be well, make good choices. Bye-bye.